Story 1. I once missed my usual bus and took the next one, feeling annoyed and half asleep. On that bus, I sat next to a woman who was sketching in a notebook. Curious, I glanced over and complimented her drawing. She smiled and we started talking. She turned out to be an illustrator working on a children's book. I shared that I wrote short stories as a hobby, and she asked to read one. 2 months later, we were co-writing a book together. A year later, it was picked up by a small publisher. Somehow, I became an author because I missed a bus. Story 2. I adopted a cat instead of waiting for a dog at the shelter. That cat turned out to be the neediest and most talkative creature ever. Kept me up so many nights that I started writing to pass the time. 3 published novels later, I owe my writing career to that little furball. Story 3. I decided to tweet and see if any single ladies wanted to have dinner. One responded, and we are now married, have an amazing son, and live in Australia. We met in the United Kingdom. Story 4. I applied for a job in a field unrelated to my qualifications after finishing university. It appeared as a promoted ad on a job seeker website, and I was primarily looking to practice customizing my resume and cover letter. 6 months later, I moved to a different city, and 10 years on, I still love it and wouldn't change a thing. Story 5. My friend was supposed to pass by my house to pick me up to go out. He got a flat tire and stopped to change it, so I was waiting for him and decided to open my laptop to see what jobs were being posted lately online. It was 2015, and online job hunting was beginning to be a trend in my country. I saw an interesting job and clicked apply. Needless to say, 10 years later, I started working there, met my current wife, and now we are living abroad and having the best times of our lives. All of this happened because a tire got punctured. Story 6. I decided to give dating a single mother a chance. I was initially against having a child or dating anyone with a child. I didn't want to be a father or a stepfather. Then I met someone I really connected with who had a 6-year-old daughter. She waited to introduce us until our relationship became serious, and I reluctantly met her daughter. Her biological father left the scene the day she was born, and that was the worst decision he ever made. Long story short, 25 years later, I walked her down the aisle at her wedding. Story 7. One night, my friends and I were driving around aimlessly, just talking about life and looking for a gas station with decent snacks. We pulled over on a random back road so one of us could use the bathroom, and there, sitting in the ditch like it was totally normal, was a tiny, filthy puppy with ears too big for its head and the saddest eyes I have ever seen. Everyone else said, "Let's call a shelter." But something in me said, "Nope, this one's mine." I wrapped him in my hoodie, bought him a snack from the gas station, and took him home. That little puppy is now my best friend, emotional support animal, and the only reason I ever go outside. Funny how a snack run turned into a lifelong friendship. Story 8. I decided not to visit a doctor in the summer of 2021, thinking I had a viral chest infection that would just pass. It turned out I didn't have a viral chest infection. I had infective endocarditis, a bacterial infection of the internal surfaces and valves of the heart. In short, I came very close to dying from endocarditis, sepsis, multiple organ failure, and several transient ischemic attacks. I lost my left leg below the knee and my right toes. I spent 6 months in acute care, 3 months in a specialized neurological rehabilitation facility, and another 15 months waiting for suitable housing. I am currently waiting for heart surgery to replace one valve and repair another. Story 9. Owning a cat brought me joy when I was feeling depressed and alone in the universe. One day, I decided to adopt a sick cat that was roaming around my apartment and nursed her back to health. It feels wonderful to come home to someone who is happy to see me. Whenever I am with her, it feels like everything will be okay. I finally found a purpose in life. Afterward, I sought professional help, and things continued to improve. Story 10. I decided to go on a solo trip to Nuremberg in 2017 because it was the cheapest flight from Manchester Airport with Ryanair. I met a Korean girl in the hostel where I stayed, and we kept in contact after I left. I have lived in Korea for 5 years now, and this Sunday marks our 1-year wedding anniversary. Story 11. I was recently single and decided to attend a camping music festival. So I chose one somewhat at random and went by myself. I used to go to raves in my late teens and early 20s, and the positive environment was beneficial for my anxiety, so I figured I might recapture some of that. However, after the first day, I found myself feeling reclusive and regretting my decision to try to be social. On day 2, I heard someone from the large friend group next to my campsite ask, "Does anyone have any mustard?" No one responded, so after what felt like too long, I said, "I have mustard." They invited me to hang out, and I made friends with them for the rest of the weekend. I started casually texting one of the girls from the group since we lived in different states. 2 months later, she invited me to see Radiohead with her friends, and we've been dating ever since. I'm planning to get her a ring this year, all because I had mustard. Story 12. I never used to stay late at work. I started at 4 a.m., so I always finished at noon. One day, I happened to stay late and visited a friend in another department who was an elderly Asian woman. Just as I was saying goodbye, a girl from her department came to the back room for her lunch break. My friend suggested that we should all go to lunch together. It was awkward since neither of us wanted to put the other in an uncomfortable position. After some persuasion from my friend, we decided to go to lunch together. We had a good time, and at the end, I was hesitant to ask for her number because I wasn't that kind of person. But something told me to ask her, so I did. She gave me her number and said the only reason she gave it to me was that it was her last day at that store. She didn't usually date coworkers. We went on a date after that, and several years later, we ended up marrying. She's my soulmate. For some reason, I stayed late that day, even though I absolutely disliked work back then and never wanted to give more to a company than necessary. But I stayed late on the day I could have met my wife. Something told me that staying late that day would change my life, and it did. I am forever grateful to my friend and to my wife, who makes me a better person in every way. Story 13. Giving up soda has made me realize how much it contributes to weight gain. Now, after weeks of going cold turkey, it tastes awful to me. Story 14. I crashed my car in September 2020, couldn't afford to replace it, and ride-sharing to and from work was too expensive, especially since they didn't service the area where my workplace was located. I found a couple who took turns driving me, and I paid them $150 a week, which worked well until December when their parents were due to fly in from out of state and needed to quarantine. I was an essential worker in a residential group home, so the threat of exposure was constant. They kindly offered to post on a community forum to help find a replacement, and I received a few messages about the opportunity. One was from a man. I worked overnight and wasn't sure about being alone with someone I didn't know in a car at night, so I initially didn't respond. A few days later, something urged me to reach out, so I did. We've been together for over 4 years now, have a beautiful and brilliant 2-year-old son, and we will be welcoming his little brother on Wednesday. Story 15. Adopting an 11-week-old collie puppy set me on a path that led to leaving a secure civil service job and starting a dog training business. Story 16. I made a job decision 37 years ago that led me to my life partner. It was the best serendipitous decision I ever made. Story 17. We had a party at our apartment, and late at night my roommates decided to go to town. I said no, I'm staying home. They urged me to come along, but I was set against it. At the last minute, I changed my mind, put on my best party dress, and off we went. Later that night, early in the morning to be exact, I met a guy in a kebab shop. I thought he was very handsome, so I approached him. We've been together for 10 years now and have one perfect child. Story 18. I was broke and needed money, so I submitted some photos to an acting agency, thinking I could make some money as an extra. I remember doing it as a kid one summer before college and getting paid for it pretty quickly. I was called for a film 2 weeks later and connected with some notable people. 4 years have gone by, and I'm now a professional actor. This experience completely changed everything for me, and I never thought I would love doing this. Story 19. Honestly, deciding to join this online art group for fun ended up leading me to meet my best friends and even got me my first freelance job. I never thought something so small would matter so much. Story 20. I decided to help someone move one weekend and met my future partner there. Changed everything. Story 21. Stop drinking. I would have never done the amazing things I have accomplished in the last 15 years if I had continued. Story 22. Throwing an eraser at the girl sitting in front of me at school led to a funny conversation and exchanging our contact numbers. We are getting divorced next year, but we are not angry with each other. We still consider each other part of the family, but at this point, it feels more like siblings than loved ones. We were together for 15 years, and we both had a great time. Story 23. I was renting out a bedroom in my house and had one person lined up for it. They kept extending the timeline for when they would move in, and I held the room for them. One day, I had enough and messaged someone else who had expressed interest when I first advertised the room. He is now my husband. Story 24. I returned home from China in February 2020. Initially, I wanted to stay in China and weather the storm, hoping that it would end in a month or so. However, I decided to go home and eventually return to China to retrieve my belongings. 5 years later, I quit my job there. My belongings are probably lying on the bottom of the ocean somewhere. I have moved to Finland and am now building my career and life here. I have no idea what would have become of me if I had stayed in China and kept my job. But I am glad I took the path I did. I would have never met the people I did and spent the last few years of my dog's life with her otherwise. Story 25. I decided to skip high school one day and instead went to a company where I was interning. A prominent person visited that day, and I introduced myself and started chatting about our common interests. That conversation led to a relationship that lasted years, and after graduating from college, I moved and became business partners with that person in a startup. All those little things, the people I met along the way, and the projects I participated in came from me skipping school one day. Story 26. I was in Turkey to have my teeth fixed. I had some time to spare, so I decided to book a medical tourism visit at a hospital in Istanbul for a full body scan at a fraction of the cost in the United States. They found a mass in November 2024, and I am now undergoing chemotherapy for stage 2 breast cancer. I have no family history of breast cancer, no symptoms, and I am quite young, so I was not planning to get a mammogram anytime soon. That casual decision likely saved my life. Story 27. I was browsing Reddit at 11 p.m. after work and saw a post for an Ask Me Anything session with an air traffic controller. I figured I would apply for fun, so I spent 15 minutes updating my resume and another 15 creating my account and submitting my application. I didn't hear anything for 2 months until I finally received an email to take the air traffic control entrance exam. I studied the day before, and a few months later, I found out I passed and received my tentative offer letter. I'm still going through the process, but I'm getting close to the end, and for the most part, it looks great. I literally made $33,000 last year helping people troubleshoot their cell phones, and this job averages $140,000 after the first 3 years. It's crazy that this all started from seeing a post on Reddit. Story 28. I did not attend the collaboration cafe for my gacha game and missed out on the merchandise. A stranger on the subreddit was giving away merchandise, and I accepted her offer. Now we have been together for over 3 years. Story 29. I was feeling depressed, and a friend had been trying to get me out of my small studio apartment for weeks. It was early spring and the first warm day of the year, so when he asked if I wanted to go for a short walk, I finally said yes. It was bright, warm, breezy, and just all around enjoyable. He suggested we go to a park where we used to hang out. We reminisced about old times and grabbed a bite to eat at a not-so-great pizza place just down the street. On the way back, we saw an old friend on the street. I remarked, "Oh, cool. I haven't seen her in ages." I was going to let her walk on without noticing us because I didn't want to bother her. My buddy said no and called over to her. She and I struck up a conversation, and before I knew it, 90 minutes had passed and my cheeks were numb from sitting on the curb. She and I have been together for 10 years now, all because I said yes to a walk. Story 30. I sniffed a girl's hair and ended up marrying her a year later. We have been married for 26 years and have 3 wonderful children. Story 31. I got drunk and thought, why not? And slept with my coworker a few months into my new job. For months later, I was pregnant. Our baby is now 15. We've been together ever since, got married, and are happily unique together. Story 32. When I was 17, I was convinced by a friend to go to a local gig in a pub. I had split up with my girlfriend a few weeks earlier and was feeling pretty down about it, not wanting to leave the house. I met my now wife there. She told me I looked like Jack Black, but it was okay because she liked him. That was 20 years ago this year. I love her immensely. We now have 2 amazing kids, and I've never looked back. How different life could have been if I hadn't gone to that pub. I know most people won't see this edit since it's a day later, but in a weird coincidence, I've just had a memory pop up. This was exactly 20 years ago today. Time flies. Story 33. I eventually told that part of my mind that was always nagging me to leave me alone. Tried to come back once or twice, but I stayed firm. It made my life so much more peaceful. Story 34. I told my sister that I had moved on and asked her to look for someone for me as a joke, not thinking anything would come of it. 2 years later, I am getting married to the most amazing person that she met at a party 2 weeks after our conversation. Story 35. I accepted a job offer to work overseas. I met my wife there, my son was born there, and I have lived there for decades. Story 36. I decided to walk to work one day. On my way home, I ran into my ex, whom I never got over. We ended up getting back together, and now we are happily married. Story 37. Switch to antibacterial soap. If antiperspirants do not effectively control body odor, it may be that your soap is not effective either. Story 38. I answered a newspaper advertisement looking to hire for a new restaurant opening soon. I was 15 at the time but eager to supplement my income from my paper route. It was a long shot due to my age, but I took the risk. The owners appreciated my work and remarked on how mature I was for someone my age. Instead of ending my life that summer as I had planned, I worked for the owners for another 6 years and will always be grateful to them for teaching me what it was like to be surrounded by people who valued me and treated me with dignity. Story 39. In 1978, my mother remarried when I started high school to a man in the military. I was uprooted from my excellent schools and sent to less than excellent schools. During my junior year, I transferred to my 4th high school. The guidance counselor who met with us to discuss my classes asked, "Your grades were excellent here, but then you got a C. What happened?" My mother got married and I changed schools. My new biology teacher graded me as if I had received a 0 for the first 4 weeks of class, even though I excelled the rest of the year. The guidance counselor said, "I would like you to take the preliminary SAT. That will help us decide where to place you." My stepfather went on a screaming tantrum. "She doesn't need it. She's a girl. She's just going to get married. I won't pay for it." The guidance counselor calmly replied, "The school can pay for it." Then she looked at me and asked, "Do you want to?" "Yes, please." I received a National Merit Scholarship from that SAT. That guidance counselor also had both my ACT and SAT fees covered. My parents kicked me out when I was 17 after I graduated high school because I wasn't going to marry the person they had chosen for me and wanted to go to college. Story 40. I was at university filling out the formal paperwork to study abroad for a semester. My advisor urged me to go for a full year rather than just the fall semester. Despite agreeing with my parents to only go for the fall semester, as they were funding it, I selected the full academic year option. I met my wife in the second semester, after I would have already been back in the United States had I not changed my plans on a whim at the last second. Story 41. I had one of those bosses who made you stay until the very last minute, even when you finished everything. I work in media production where you get hired for 12-hour days, and that boss made you stay the entire 12 hours. I made my respectful case as to why that was a poor idea, but I got turned down and assigned busy work. So I thought, fine, I'll just pretend, and I opened up Tinder and started swiping out of spite. There was a guy behind me at the other desk who was watching, and he saw what I was doing and began laughing. I felt embarrassed at getting caught, and then I started laughing too. We shared a moment over something trivial. After that, we never really interacted again. But 3 months later, I received a message from him to work on a project. That one small gig turned into 6 non-stop solid years of freelancing, working around the world on some pretty cool projects, and it gave me financial independence. Story 42. I decided to talk with someone who posts maps online. Now I have my own account and I'm getting an average of 22 million views per month. Story 43. I clicked "Remind me later" on a software update in 2022. That laptop is now the core server for my side hustle, and I still live in fear of its final shutdown. I am not the founder. It is. Story 44. I have decided that I do not want to have children, and I will be open with others about this choice. The thought of it brings a sense of calm. Story 45. I decided to work with a family friend while experiencing severe depression. I didn't say a word to the girl I worked with for 2 years. In the 3rd year, I spoke up, and we are getting married in August. Story 46. I decided to distance myself from my in-laws. They are aware of my decision. I spent years trying to be a good daughter-in-law, but their judgmental and unsupportive behavior was negatively impacting my life. Story 47. I asked the woman sitting next to me on the plane one last question. "What do you do for fun?" She replied, "Tap dancing." We talked for the rest of the ride. She has been married for 20 years this fall. Story 48. I added my current partner on Snapchat. We have been together for a while now, and we are expecting our first child. We also have a beautiful new kitten. Story 49. My first year in college at 18, before the fall semester started, I went to adopt a puppy. I had always wanted a Rottweiler growing up, and I saw 2 Rottweiler mixes available for adoption, a male and a female. I intended to adopt the male, but he had already been adopted. I was hesitant to adopt the female since I really wanted a male dog, but I decided to take her home anyway. She had severe mange, a terrible skin infection, and gastrointestinal parasites at just 12 weeks, so I nursed her back to health. My boyfriend at the time broke up with me 2 months later. She became the love of my life. I had her from cradle to grave, caring for her through her medical issues and regular puppy matters, helping her through her old age and complex illnesses. She, in turn, cared for me through my breakups, mental health challenges, lost friendships, graduating without a job lined up, my father going to jail, my parents separating, and overall adult struggles. I did not spend a second of my 20s without her. I went from being a teenager to my 30s with her as my constant. We experienced 6 different houses, 2 college towns, 2 long-term relationships, and had 12 beautiful years together. She was my heart dog and soulmate. My world shattered when I lost her suddenly. I am still figuring out what the world looks like without her, and it has been 3 years. I do not go a day without thinking about her. I would have given half my years if I knew we could live the rest together. I miss you every day, Jude. Story 50. In November 2020, I picked up some cookies from a home baker on a Wednesday, and on the way home, I saw a huge dirt lot with a sign for a new neighborhood coming soon. I reached out to a family friend in real estate to inquire about the starting prices of the homes and whether my situation would allow me to purchase one. He ran the numbers, I took online tours of the homes, and by Sunday, I was signing a contract to buy my first home at 42. After 19 years of being a single mom, a year later, I was living in my home and loving it, just me and my kids. My neighbors introduced me to a friend of theirs, and we have been together ever since. He moved in with us about 9 months ago. If I hadn't gotten those cookies, none of this would have happened. Story 51. I watched a video of a famous dancing tiger. 3 years later, I have a YouTube channel with nearly 1,000 videos, mostly from China. I am attending Chinese language classes 4 times a week, and I am working and learning video editing and photography. I flew across the world twice to meet him, which was my first time outside my country, my first time on a plane, and my first time alone in a country where I don't know the language or have any friends. I am likely going again by the end of this year. Social media can be dangerous, kids. They were not kidding. Story 52. I affirmed a non-binary student's identity in a Catholic school setting. I fully stand by what I did for this student, but my supervisor became upset when she found out. Most of my exit interview focused on this student. Whenever she used the student's dead name, I would quietly repeat their chosen name. I left the Catholic Church and teaching to work in math intervention as a paraprofessional in public and charter schools instead, and I am much happier. Story 53. I took a job that pays 80% more than my current job. It significantly affected my mental well-being from 2022 until now. I will need a lot of therapy to overcome everything I endured. Story 54. I was going to work at my childhood camp. The interview was strange. They offered a position, but the season dates didn't align well with my school schedule, and there was no guarantee I would work at my camp, as staff were rotated through multiple sites. I had applied to a camp job board months earlier and received an email weeks before summer asking if I would be interested in interviewing for another camp with the same organization in the next state over. After a phone interview, I received an offer the next day and accepted it. 12 years later, I am living in that state, surrounded by people I met at camp. I am an aunt to several of my camp friends' children. I've changed my career path because of the camp experience and never could have predicted I would be where I am today. Story 55. I decided at the last minute to go on a ski trip with my best friend of 8 years. We had not had any feelings for each other, but both realized on that trip, oh wait, this is what I want. We did not act on the feelings, but came home and both eventually broke up with our respective partners. We have been together for 3 years now. Story 56. I am from South Texas but decided to be a fan of the Minnesota Vikings when I was little. My fandom led me to apply for a special program at a high school outside my area because I wanted to play sports for a school that wore purple uniforms. I got in and, because I was no longer with people who knew me, I reinvented myself a bit. I played a variety of sports, met friends that I still hang out with today, and met my wife when we were 16. I followed her to college instead of joining the military. I ended up in a career I never imagined for myself and have been nationally recognized for my work. My wife and I have now been together for 20 years, married for 14, and we have 3 children, own our home, and couldn't be happier. All thanks to my affinity for the Minnesota Vikings and the color purple. Now, if they could just win a Super Bowl, I could die happy. Story 57. Back in the early 2000s, I used to browse online journals that people kept. One journal I frequently visited was Free Open Diary. They had a random journal button, which allowed users to read random journals that weren't set to private. That's how I initiated a conversation that led to an online relationship with someone 900 miles away, ultimately resulting in my relocation there 3 years later. Although we are no longer together, that entire chapter of my life brought me to where I am now, as it was a consequence of being constantly online and bored back then. Story 58. Checking a Gmail account I barely used, I remembered that I had applied for a visa to go to Canada to work for a year and was on the waiting list. I totally forgot about it. 3 months later, feeling bored, I decided to check the account and found a fresh email from the Canadian Embassy requesting that I send them my passport and pay the $150 fee. My visa was approved. I have now been living here for 10 years and am happier than ever. Story 59. I entered my first stand-up comedy competition. I had been doing sets for a while at university but had never entered a competition before and was a bit nervous about not having full control or being voted off in the first couple of minutes, as it was a gong show. I seriously considered pulling out. One of my friends attended the show and brought her new partner, who ran a film company. I won the show. I was offered a television presenting role as a result and ended up working internationally, making documentaries. It launched a career in broadcasting and journalism that has lasted 20 years and counting. Story 60. I used to post Photoshop artwork on my MySpace account years ago. One day, I received a message from a girl in Canada. She said she liked my artwork. I thanked her and didn't think much of it. We ended up chatting back and forth for years, becoming close friends. We progressed to phone calls and video chats, and we dated people along the way but always found reasons to break it off. Finally, we decided to meet up, so I flew 2,000 miles across the country, and we got snowed in together during a blizzard. We spent 10 days together, and it felt as natural as breathing. 18 years later, we're married with 2 amazing kids, and I am still amazed that something as small as replying to a stranger online would change literally everything. Story 61. Drinking whiskey. I used to have severe social anxiety and struggled in many areas of my life. Some days it was difficult for me to leave my room. One day, while alone in my room drinking Old Crow from a Slurpee cup, I went out to use the bathroom, and surprisingly, I didn't feel the same level of shame and anxiety I usually felt around my roommates. I decided to experiment by walking outside. The sun was bright, and the air was crisp, but it was a slow day with no people or cars in sight. I chose to walk to the mailbox to see how that felt. I was scared, but I was also okay. Nothing hurt me, and it actually felt somewhat good. On my way back, I saw my neighbor walking by, and we made brief eye contact without exchanging words. Normally, I would have panicked over this, but it was amazing. I felt nothing. I continued my experiments in the following days, and long story short, I now have a job as a letter carrier with my local post office, all thanks to Old Crow. I've also upgraded my whiskey choices as my new income has allowed me to focus on what matters most in life. If you're looking for a good bargain, I highly recommend Wild Turkey. It's an excellent whiskey for the price. Story 62. Sleeping on the floor was uncomfortable at first, but after a few nights with multiple pillows and blankets, I began to prefer it over my old mattress. The cooler temperatures and almost double the floor space after rolling up my blankets have led me to actually get up when I am awake instead of lying there. As someone who moves frequently, not owning any furniture besides a desk and a chair makes living this way much easier. I wouldn't say it has changed my life forever, and I will likely return to sleeping on a real bed soon, but it has had some positive effects that I wasn't expecting, which I am sure will stick with me. Story 63. I decided to take automotive technology classes at the local community college. I had recently graduated with my bachelor's degree and wanted to restore an old Volkswagen. With only a hobbyist's understanding of how to do this, I enrolled in the classes. I learned about the discount that employees of the community college received on classes and started looking at their job board. Before long, I was working at their help desk. It was full-time, so my classes had to wait. The assistant director of student life was a frequent customer. We started bumping into each other in the halls and having conversations about various topics. She was very charming. We have been together for 12 years and married for 8. I still know very little about cars. Story 64. I jokingly asked a work colleague if she knew anyone who was single. Turned out her brother was single. I went on a date with him the following week, moved in with him a few months later, and now we are very happy together. I met the kind of guy I had always been looking for. Story 65. About a year ago, after a weekend of belly pain and a doctor's visit for constipation, I took my girlfriend to the emergency room after she told me, "The medication worked. It's suddenly gone." It was the best decision ever. Her appendix had burst. If we hadn't gone, she probably would have died that night. Story 66. Turning around and saying hello to the random person who touched my shaved head in lecture was a surprising moment. I turned around, and they were staring as if their hand had a mind of its own. That person is now my partner. They changed my life, for better or worse, I don't know. Story 67. I agreed to kiss my childhood friend at a party. 18 years later, after 11 years of marriage and 3 children, it remains the best decision of my life. Story 68. I accepted a last-minute invitation that I almost ignored. That night, I met someone who completely changed the course of my life. I still can't believe it. Story 69. About 12 years ago, I went to buy an old guitar at a small shop in the town where I lived at the time. When I arrived, they were locking up early for one reason or another. I tried to convince them to let me purchase the guitar quickly, but it was not possible. Down the street was the local animal shelter. I went there just to pass the time since I was new to town and didn't know anyone. The shelter was old, with concrete block and chain-link gates for the kennels. All of the dogs were barking aggressively at their gates, except for one, a small, unattractive mixed breed they named Annie. She was sitting politely, happily wagging her tail and looking longingly at me. I exclaimed, "I didn't want to get a dog today." She came home with me after I paid $50 and signed some papers. My apartment manager wasn't happy. My friends and family thought I was making a mistake. But she still sleeps with me every night, behaves perfectly off-leash, has been one of the best friends I have ever had, has run countless miles in the woods, and is incredibly loyal. She is getting old and sick now, though. I'm going to miss her. We already lost her companion suddenly last summer. Story 70. I decided to take a temporary job out of desperation because I was broke. Just the first job that would hire me. 10 years later, I went from doing data entry to a career in cybersecurity, owning a house and 2 cars, with my dream project car currently on the way to my home from New Mexico. Nothing compares to meeting the love of my life, but I'm still very happy. Story 71. I believe going to the temple every day, along with meditation and chanting, has significantly improved my inner positivity. I feel firm, calm, and genuinely happy. Regardless of whether I have 10 rupees or 10 lakh, I remain content. This shift truly changed my life for the better. Story 72. I decided to try a new route home from work one day because I was bored. I stopped at a small coffee shop I had never noticed before. The barista there is now my wife of 6 years. All because I was tired of the same old drive. Story 73. I flew from my hometown to Toronto with just a small suitcase. I was going to house and cat sit for my aunt and uncle. I ended up getting a job and never left Toronto, where I have lived for nearly a decade. I always tell people I never had an official move away from home moment. It was just a drive to the airport. Story 74. I went to the doctor because I was experiencing bladder pain, but I didn't think it was anything serious. I was given antibiotics for a urinary tract infection. After taking the first dose, I developed a 104-degree fever and severe kidney pain. I went to the emergency room, where they informed me that I was septic and just a couple of hours away from septic shock and permanent kidney damage due to 3 kidney stones blocking my urethra and bladder. After 2 surgeries, I am doing well. It has been about 7 months since my second surgery. Story 75. A small decision I made that had a big impact on my life was taking care of my mental and physical health. This self-care prepared me to face the challenges of life every day. Story 76. I haven't checked in with my gender since I was 15, and back then I was too depressed to tell. Let's ask my friends to use random pronouns for me for a bit to see if anything resonates. Just in case. I have been out as a transgender woman for 3 years and have been on estrogen for almost 1 year now. Story 77. Out of revenge, I decided to take Chinese classes because my groupmates were against the Japanese class, which depended on the number of votes. Story 78. As a recovering alcoholic, when I stopped drinking alcohol, it became the single most important decision I make every day. I cannot list all the things that changed for the better when I stopped drinking. I would never go back now. It is amazing how one decision can completely change your life. Story 79. I think about this daily. Unknowingly hired my soulmate 10 years ago, which ultimately led to early retirement. In 2015, I was deciding between 2 candidates for a job early in my career in a major US city. I was only a position above entry level, but my boss had quit, and I was put in charge of the interview process, hiring for an open entry-level spot on my team. I lobbied for the most qualified choice over the popular choice and stated my case effectively enough internally to extend an offer. She said no. I called her after a few days to reiterate my case, and she decided to accept. I learned years later that she immediately regretted accepting and was planning on leaving the company after 2 weeks. We hired her, and she immediately outperformed anyone who had ever done the job before. She broke records, and I was in awe and very attracted to her. We both were in relationships, but over the course of a year, both ended and we got together. Her career quickly eclipsed mine as expected. I kept up as best I could. Over the next few years, we both got promoted, moved around to different companies, and had a partner who understood everything we were going through. The job was extremely stressful and very competitive. So we had each other to vent to and also to compete with. Fast forward 7 very happy, fun, loving, but definitely career first years together. And we both decided to quit our jobs, put all of our belongings in storage and move to Europe. No jobs, no responsibilities, no meetings, no presentations, no client calls, no entertaining. I don't know what's next, but I don't care as long as we're doing it together. Something as small as a hiring decision made 10 years ago led to being semi-retired, living in a foreign country after a career I never could have imagined, all thanks to the woman I'm madly in love with who, as far as I can tell, chooses to love me every day. I didn't mean to write all of that, but I got carried away because I'm still so shocked at what my life has turned into because I decided to extend the offer and she decided to accept it. In summary, I hired the less popular but more qualified candidate. We dated, we pushed each other to grow in our careers, we retired early together, and now we live in a foreign country. Story 80. I was overlooked for a supervisor role at my old job that only paid $50,000 a year. I would show up on my days off, perform tasks outside of my normal duties, and cover for other supervisors. I even won Employee of the Year at my company and was upset that I remained a backup supervisor instead of a full-time supervisor. Frustrated, I went online to look for jobs and applied for my current position. I doubled my salary and moved into a different field of work that I love. I can finally live on my own in a high cost of living area. Story 81. Saying sure, why not to a last-minute invite I almost turned down led me to meet someone that night who completely shifted my path. Story 82. I decided one day to stop hiding and wear makeup to school. Just simple eyeliner and lip tint. I thought no one would notice, but that small change made me feel more confident. I started speaking up more, making friends, and even joined a club. I used to feel invisible, but that one decision helped me start believing in myself. Story 83. I attended a job fair because I was tired of my dead-end job. The company I wanted to talk to had a line of 30 people, but the one next to it had none, so I decided to apply there. 12 years later, I have an impressive resume in finance, my Master of Business Administration degree was paid for, and I have a well-paying job working from home. My undergraduate degree is in biology. Story 84. I was deleting my Hinge account but decided to match with one last guy. His profile featured him in a Hawaiian shirt taking Christmas pictures with his cat in a Santa hat. Even if it went nowhere because the app wasn't great, I had to see what he was about. He ended up being exactly what I was looking for and more. I don't want to imagine the rest of my life without him. If he's reading this, he's going to know this is me because he doesn't understand why I am so obsessed with that particular picture and I bring it up constantly. Story 85. I went for a drink with strangers after a long day of workshops. There was an older lady who had forgotten her wallet, so I bought her a soft drink. We talked a bit and then went our separate ways. 2 years later, I was unemployed when she called me out of the blue to offer me a stable, long-term job with pay I could never have dreamed of in my previous situation. I accepted right away. I moved to another country, learned a new language, and met a woman I would like to marry if she agrees. I am now writing a book, living in a flat I love in a wonderful city, and have no financial issues. That was the best €2 I have ever spent. Story 86. I decided to communicate and be vulnerable. I was having an argument with my girlfriend, and she cried to the point of a panic attack. I questioned what I was doing. Is being right more important than my partner? I stopped being passive-aggressive and started working on listening with the intention of understanding. It made all my relationships much easier. Story 87. I decided to apply for a university degree in Europe. I was accepted and have been living there for almost 10 years now. Story 88. I went into a restaurant to eat one day. I was looking awful, and one of the employees at the restaurant kept staring at me. I thought it was weird, but now that person is the love of my life. Story 89. I wasn't sure if I should attend the meetup where I met my now husband, but my sister encouraged me to go. I had nothing better to do, so I decided to show up and leave if I felt awkward. Surprisingly, things worked out as if the universe had planned it all along. It changed my life and took me on a wonderful roller coaster ride. Story 90. I was a senior in high school with a 3-quarter scholarship to university, planning to study physics and astronomy. Then September 11th occurred, and a week later, I enlisted in the military as an aircraft mechanic. Now, I am working as an aerospace engineer. I had only been on an airplane once or twice before I enlisted, and I didn't even have aerospace on my radar. Story 91. My dad was running the store and I was supposed to go with him. I really had to use the restroom, and my dad was impatient, so he left for the store without me. As he was going through the intersection at the end of our road, a driver ran a red light and collided with him, crushing the passenger side of his car. Deciding to use the restroom quickly probably saved my life. Story 92. Abandon your abusive, narcissistic, and manipulative parents when they need you. Why? My parents were and are highly narcissistic and abusive, controlling individuals. They stole my passport. My father strangulated me. My mother watched me get hit by a car and did not sue the car owner. My father used coercion under duress. My father disrupted my job interview. My mother stole my birthday gift. My brother, father, and mother all think I fabricated the story of being strangulated by my father. I come from a Korean family which can be extremely toxic in both family and work life. Korea has the highest suicide rate among OECD countries and has held this position for several years. They attacked my relationship without even knowing or meeting my partner, contacting her family and workplace while threatening them. 10. They favor my brother because he is a dentist and can do no wrong. 11. They are highly manipulative with their words. 12. They stole family money as well. 13. I faced hostility from my aunt, uncle, and grandmother. 14. They lied in court. Still, they admit no wrongdoing after over 10 years. Story 93. Deciding to sign up for orchestra in 7th grade. My school district had a required music program for grades 5 and 6, as our elementary schools went through 6th grade at the time. I ended up picking the cello. I liked it. I wasn't super passionate about it, but I enjoyed playing music. My friend signing up for orchestra convinced me to give it a try in middle school when it became an elective instead of a required class. Once 7th grade orchestra started, a few weeks into the class, the director asked if anyone would be willing to switch to playing bass. Most elementary schools had not introduced students to bass, so we only had one at the start of the class. He specifically asked the cellos if any of us were interested since our sheet music was written in the same clef. I thought, sure, why not? I'll give it a try. And within a day, I completely fell in love with it. It was like something clicked that never did with the cello. I actively wanted to play it. I truly enjoyed playing it. I played bass in my school's orchestra throughout middle and high school. I never got very good at it due to my poor practice habits stemming from what turned out to be unrecognized depression and undiagnosed attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder. However, that did not change the fact that the orchestra had a huge impact on my life. I met many wonderful friends through that class, including one of my closest friends to this day. They were the original lone bass player we had. All the other bass players became treasured friends of mine as well. I don't talk to the others much anymore, but they were still very important to me at the time. Now, while I haven't played double bass since I graduated almost 3 years ago, I recently picked up a bass guitar and decided to start a band with some friends. All this came from one school music class. I will be honest. If I hadn't switched to bass, I probably would not have continued with the orchestra for so long. While classical music was never really my favorite, it gave me a love for performing and playing music, as well as a deeper appreciation for all that goes into music. It provided me with the confidence and musical background I needed to feel empowered to play music with my friends now. Realizing the rippling butterfly effect from that one offhand, sure, why not? Choice to try out bass in 7th grade has encouraged me to be more adventurous and adopt that, sure, why not? Attitude towards more things in life. As someone with anxiety, having that extra motivation to push myself to try new things, even when I am scared or reluctant, has been significant in getting me out of my comfort zone. You truly don't know when you're going to find your next big thing. You don't know what will matter to you until you try it. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.